Happy Mola Monday everybody, and welcome to this week's Hall of Trials video. If you were looking for a week to get the Dagger Sicar mission completed for Zeno, this is the week. This Hall of Trials conditions makes it pretty easy to do with units that are relatively common. I'm going to go over two different teams. The first team will be a two-man cheese team, and the second team will be a more stable, higher scoring four-man team. So the conditions for this week are, you can't CR push any of your units, so no cheesing with A-lots. If you run a thief on the team, the thief does 50% less damage, so thieves are pretty much useless for this fight. You need to be able to apply bleeds to Zeno to get that 75% damage boost, and warriors get a bonus 30% to attack and health, making warriors very valuable. The units that I chose for the two-man cheese are Conqueror Lilius and Sigret. I went with Sigret because her S1 skill has bleeds on it and her S2 skill has bleeds on it. I put her on my best rage set. I should have put a little bit more effectiveness on her. I did in the second video. I relied a little bit too much on RNG running at 0 effectiveness. You want her on her second EE, the one that increases the chance for her S1 skill to impart bleeds to 70%, and the reason for that is Zeno takes more damage and does less damage when he has more than 2 debuffs on him. I gave her the Hall of Trials artifact. You could use Symbol of Unity if you don't have that one built or leveled. Next on my team is Conqueror Lilius. She's going to be my dual attack cheese unit for this. I put her on Midnight Bloom to increase the stat threshold and not have to re-gear my Sigret too terribly much. You can put her on Warhorn or some other damage boosting artifact as well. Now at the start of the fight, Zeno uses his ultimate skill, which puts buff block and restrict on your units. You need to stall for time to get that buff block to fall away, and you don't want to kill Zeno too quickly. So I use my S2 first just to waste a round. Now if Zeno has bleeds on him, you want to hit the add so you don't kill Zeno too quickly. Like that. This may take a couple of attempts to get the timing down right, but it eventually works. Whether or not you apply Vigor before or after entering the break phase won't matter that much. You're talking maybe 300k extra damage if you do it before. But regardless, once you push into the break phase, you've now got Vigor on Sigret. It's just a matter of doing dual attacks. Whenever it is Sigret's turn, her first round you want to use her S2 because Zeno's below 50% health. She automatically gets the second swipe. You also want to stack as many debuffs as possible for Sigret's second turn. The more debuffs that are stacked on Zeno, the stronger and harder her S3 skill hits. So once it's her second turn, you let the S3 skill rip. Solid 600k damage. I should get 1 or 2 more strikes in before we exit the break phase. Having done this phase a few times, I usually score somewhere between 3 and 4 million. I think as long as you're over 3 million, you should be able to get to Dagger Sicar relatively easily. Now, this part you want to rush down Zeno as quickly as possible. You don't have any source of healing, and he does a good chunk of damage every time he attacks. And you want to make sure you push into the next break phase before he does his ultimate again and reestablishes buff block on your Sigret, preventing you from using Vigor. This took probably 4 or 5 attempts before I got the RNG down to the point where bleeds were sticking on my 0% effectiveness Sigret, and I was able to push him all the way to the break phase. I am right up against it. I think the next hit should push phase, so I'll go ahead and activate Vigor and then do my S1 skill and see if it pushes phase. And it doesn't quite get me to push phase, but I can take one more hit. The silence doesn't really matter because I still have Vigor up on Lilius, so I can do the S1 here, and it will definitely push phase. Unfortunately, none of my nice bleeds were preserved. You need bleed to do 75% more damage, and once you have more than 2 debuffs on Zeno, you start doing extra damage. Zeno also does less damage to you if you have 3 or more debuffs on him, so that's another reason I chose Sigret for this over Lilibet, because it's a lot easier to stack bleeds with Sigret. Once again, when you get to the point where Sigret can do her S3, you let it rip.
Please disappear.
And that's 7.4 million. And with this next hit, I hit the Dagger Sicar threshold without even clearing the final stage of Holotrials. So even if you get a lower stat threshold on your Sigret, you should still be able to push Dagger Sicar with this team. Without any source of healing or cleansing, I don't think it's possible for this two-man team to complete Dagger Sicar. And a 700k threshold is a small threshold. Because of that, I'm going to go ahead and show you a second team. This second team, if you can build it, is a much better, safer, easier to run team. We're going to keep using Sigret, but we're going to toss Conqueror Lilius out. We're going to bring in the Queen, Kitty Clarissa. Kitty Clarissa has got a cleanse on her S3 and she dual attacks, so she will help us with all of the debuffs that Zeno throws around and will amp up Sigret's damage and give us additional chances for bleeds. I'm going to take Sinful Angelica. She can give everybody an attack buff. We did that 8.7 million last round without any attack buff, so Singelica will help us with that, and Camilla will also help us with dual attacks and has a defense break to make clearing the phases easier. I put the Midnight Bloom on Kitty Clarissa so I didn't have to spend gold re-gearing my Sigret. You can put a damage artifact on her like a Squirt Gun or Card of Small Miracles if you're able to get the 100% crit chance on your Sigret without it. Sinful Angelica, you want to have her damage imprint turned on to make sure that you're boosting the damage of your Sigret. I like her on the Doctor's Bag artifact. It gives her some semblance of healing and lets her assist with the cleanses. If you don't have this artifact, that's fine. You can put her on Celestine or some other healing artifact, or you can stick her on another damage artifact. Camilla, I just put on Warhorn to give everybody a bonus to their damage. The CR pushing doesn't happen because of the restrictions of Holotrials. You can leave her speed imprint on or turn it off. You can build Camilla for damage if you want. She will actually contribute quite a bit of damage to this fight if you put her on Rage Pen set. I just didn't want to spend the gold re-gearing, so I left her on my standard Expedition build. Sigret is built exactly the same as in the prior fight, except I moved a couple of pieces of gear around just to give her a little bit of effectiveness. You don't need to go berserk, but 32% effectiveness plus the 10% I'm getting from Squirt Gun gets me enough effectiveness. Her bleeds should stick a little more reliably in the in-between phases. So, as I said, this team is a lot more stable. This was my very first and only run using this team, and it worked very, very well. Zeno does his ultimate, puts all of his debuffs on it. Kitty Clarissa reverses that. You need your Kitty Clarissa to be the first unit on the team to go. She doesn't have to be hyper fast, she just has to be faster than your Singelica. She dual attacks, sets some damage up. You want to make sure a bleed sticks. If a bleed doesn't stick, just restart. Singelica uses her ultimate, and that puts an attack buff and speed buff on everybody. And when Camilla attacks, that should push phase, with or without that defense break. Now you just start doing your dual attacks. Once you establish 3 debuffs, you're doing maximum damage. Always use Sigret's S2 because it gets the double swipe because we're below 50% health. Kitty Clarissa and Singelica and Camilla just keep using their S1 skills. Now you notice Kitty Clarissa's S3 has run out. That's completely fine. You will run out of dual attacks before this fight is over. Do not use her S3. It's not worth the handful of extra points you'll get. You want to save her S3 for exiting this phase so you can remove the debuffs again. We exit stage 1 at 4.3 million, which is pretty decent. I suspect it could have been more, but I'm happy with that. That's more than enough to get to Dagger Sicar. Do not hit Zeno with Singelica because it pushes Zeno and there's no reason to cycle his ultimate up even faster. Kitty Clarissa can remove all of the debuffs, start paving the way to get to the next phase. Now I do want to stall a little bit here, so I'm going to take out these units in the front just because they do extra damage. I'm going to save my Sinful Angelica's S3. I meant to hit the mod in the front, not Zeno, but it is what it is. Again, when you hit Zeno, it pushes him, so don't do wasted attacks from Singelica into Zeno. I got my first bleed, so now I'm ready to do some serious damage. Kitty hits the ad so that she doesn't push Zeno up anymore, and my nice bleed went away. But that's okay. If this gets me a defense break, there we go. Defense break and bleeds. This attack would probably push phase, so I don't want to push phase quite yet. I want to make sure Singelica's S3 is up before we push phase, so I kill the ad, and I forgot to use her S3. That's okay. This is going to cost me some points, but it shows that this team is overgeared for this. I transform Kitty inside of the phase, which wastes a round. Camilla thankfully still had her attack buff from her earlier skill. Singelica can S3 reapply the attack buffs. You know, maybe this isn't so bad. I wasted 2 dual attacks doing Kitty and Singelica's S3, but it's going to give Camilla an attack buff and Sigret an attack buff, perhaps 1 turn longer than it would normally. So maybe this is a good thing. Keep pushing the dual attacks. Even with this questionable entrance into this fight, I've already passed the Dagger Sicar threshold and still have several more hits on Zeno. Sigret's S3 unfortunately isn't ready, so I have to use her S1. And 9 million. And Camilla never got to use that second attack, so yeah, I probably cheated myself out of about 1 million points because of that unfortunate mistake of not using Singelica's S3 earlier and dual attacking into this phase. But the nice thing about this team is it's got the staying power to take it all the way. I've got the Doctor's Bag on Sinful Angelica, and also her Soul Harvest skill can help batch your health up a little bit. I'm going to try to take care of these front row mobs because it's just extra damage I don't need to deal with.
Destroying everything is too annoying. Here.
Understood.
Okay, so Sinful Angelica finally gets her turn, and this is why I like Doctor's Bag on her for this fight. This skill normally wouldn't heal at all. It does a pretty good chunk of healing to the whole team. And I'm going to hit Zeno because I want to establish the bleeds. I got the defense break, so this is going to be a pretty clean kill once that defense break hit. Oh my god, he got the evasion. Zeno has a built-in small % chance to dodge, and when he dodges, he cleanses all of your nice buffs or debuffs, and he gives himself skill and all. It can totally brick a run. What's Hall of Trials without a little RNG though, right? Still, this team's going to push all the way to the end, no problem.
Clarissa wants to play. Meow.
I get a bleed on this attack. I did, so the next hit will kill. I used the S2 because I thought I'd get the double swipe, but I didn't because it killed. I should have used the S3. Would have got me maybe an extra 100k points on this final score. But 10.4 million with a whole bunch of mistakes throughout the fight. #1 rank. So I like this team. I think the stats are relatively accessible. I know my speed on Kitty and Singelica was high. Doesn't need to be. Can run them much slower, just need to go in order. I know my Sigret had a very, very strong Rage Pen set. Don't need it. I was over-capped on my score by 25%. You could run a much lower gear standard with this team and complete your Dagger Sicar mission. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it helps you complete your Dagger Sicar and get those molas. If you liked this video, give it a like, and if you enjoy the content, consider a subscribe. And thanks for all of your words of encouragement. I really appreciate it. Have a great week, guys.